Last night, we read about the BFG. Poor little Sophie, she's laying in her bed. She's terrified because he saw her. So now he has to come in and snatch her. It's called the snatch. You can see the image down at the bottom of it is a big giant hand. And the question I asked is, what would you do if you were Sophie? And I love reading your answers. So here we go. Under the blanket, Sophie waited. After a minute or so, she lifted a corner of the blanket and she peeped out. For the second time that night, her blood froze to ice and she wanted to scream, but no sound came out. There, at the window, with the curtains pushed aside, was the enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face of the giant person staring in. The flashing black eyes were fixed on Sophie's bed. The next moment, a huge hand with pale fingers came, snaking in through the window. This was followed by an arm as thick as a tree trunk. The arm, the hand, the fingers were reaching out across the room towards Sophie's bed. This time, Sophie really did scream, but only for a second, because very quickly, the huge hand clamped down over her blanket, and the scream was smothered by the bedclothes. Sophie, crouching underneath the blanket, felt strong fingers grasping hold of her, and then she lifted up from her bed, blanket and all, and whisked out of the window. If you can think of anything more terrifying than that happening to you in the middle of the night, then let's hear about it. The awful thing was that Sophie knew exactly what was going on, although she couldn't see it happening. She knew that this monster giant with an enormous, long, pale, wrinkly face and dangerous eyes had plucked her from her bed in the middle of the witching hour and was now carrying her out through the window smothered in a blanket. What actually happened next was this. When the giant had got Sophie outside, he arranged the blankets so that he could grasp all the four corners of it at once in one of his huge hands, with Sophie imprisoned inside. In the other hand, he seized the suitcase and the long trumpet thing, and off he ran. Sophie, by squirming around inside the blanket, managed to push the top of her head out through a little gap just below the giant's hand. She stared around her. The giant was sprinting down the high street. He was running so fast, his black cloak, and remember last night I had said that that's like a long jacket, or it's a jacket that you don't really put your arms in. It kind of is like a cape. It was streaming out behind. Look, there's a picture. See the long cape? That's what a cloak is. And there's itsy bitsy little Sophie peeking out of the blanket in his hand. There's the trumpet thing. There's the suitcase. And there he is sprinting. That means running. Let me go back. I didn't finish that sentence. Sorry. He was running so fast, his black cloak was streaming out behind him like the wings of a bird. Each stride he took was as long as a tennis court. So in other words, every time he would step as he was running, it was like one step across an entire tennis court. That's how tall he was and how long it was between his legs. Out of the village he ran, and soon they were racing across the moonlit fields. The hedges dividing the fields were no problem to the giant. He simply strode over them. A wide river appeared in his path. He crossed it in one flying stride. Sophie crouched in the blanket, peering out. She was being bumped against the giant's leg like a sack of potatoes. Over the fields and hedges and rivers they went, and after a while, a frightening thought came into Sophie's head. The giant is running fast, she told herself, because he's hungry. He wants to get home as quickly as possible, and then he's going to have me for breakfast. Next chapter is called The Cave. Okay, so some questions for you guys, and I'll put them in the comments too. This chapter, although it was kind of short, it was just one not even a whole page. So 1, and then that page plus this page makes 2. So like 2 pages long. There were a lot of adjectives there. So the author rolled out, he describes in detail what the giant looked like, his face, his eyes, his hand. He describes, let's see, the blanket. He describes the suitcase. He describes the trumpet. For example, the word long is an adjective. It describes the trumpet, long trumpet. He describes the street. He describes the cloak. He uses an adjective to describe, the hedges, the river, the fields, the potato,